I can't hunt. All right, at ease. Then on second thought, maybe not. I'm Sergeant Slaughter, and I got some real hairy action heading your way. Action that would send most guys screaming for their mama. But damn, the Joes ain't most guys, are they? Yo, Joe! Yo, Joe! Over the next 5 days, you're gonna see the greatest G.I. Joe adventure of all time. With the greatest roll call of Joes ever. Hawk! Shoot!
Pass me through. We've got to warn him.
And roadblock. And yeah, even your old friend the Sarge. My job is to whip you into shape. And I'm talking whip. Plus some new Joes.
Okay, guys, prove us rawhides aren't raw.
And a brand new enemy.
Organisms of Cobra La, detach and defend to the death.
So grab your helmets and buckle on your bandoliers. Because here comes the first chapter of G.I. Joe the movie. Yo, Joe!
Look out, everybody, 'cause he's coming here today. He's a man who stands for freedom and the American way. Well, he values life and liberty and the flag long made wave. No man could love his country more. And to this we say, Sergeant Slaughter, everyone is behind you. Sergeant Slaughter, you defend our red, white, and blue, 'cause you love everybody in this land so much. But if somebody puts down America, they better beware of the COVID clutch.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Not Content Podcast. My name is Jerome Cuson. Please, as always, leave 4- and 5-star reviews on Spotify and Apple so that we can get the algorithms going and people can continue to discover this show. We are also on YouTube at From the Queue. This podcast is part of that network. Because it is the first Tuesday of the month, we are doing The Right Match, where we pair a match with a movie. Tonight, we are pairing The Iron Sheik and Sergeant Slaughter from June 16th, 1984, the 40th anniversary of this match. And we are pairing it with a movie that Sergeant Slaughter, in fact, is a voice in. That would be the 1987 animated G.I. Joe movie. Our theme has been anniversaries, and this is the time when the big anniversary is the 40th anniversary of the Iron Sheik and Sergeant Slaughter. Brian, we are going to start off by talking about this match, Iron Sheik and Sergeant Slaughter. I want to start here. This is going to be, typically with The Right Match, I feel like we spend a lot more time talking about the movie. I think in this case, we're probably going to spend more time talking about the match because it's a fascinating watch in 2024 for a number of different reasons. But Brian, when you and I think about the Iron Sheik, I think we think of Sheiky Baby. We think of like WrestleMania 17 Sheik that can barely move. We think about like the fact that he is a parody of himself at this point. Unfortunately, he did pass away last year. But with Sergeant Slaughter, it just feels like he's not a self-parody, but obviously, things were complicated with the WWF for so long. He comes back as an Iraqi sympathizer, and it's just, I mean, he comes back in the commissioner's role, and it's treated as kind of a joke. But we can watch this match, and we can see, like, these two guys in their prime presented probably as they should have always been.
So for me, as like for an Iron Sheik fan, like of course it was just, Hulk Hogan's greatest hits on the VHS, and you see him defeat Iron Sheik in January of '84, start a Hulkamania. But the last couple of years, actually, I've actually started like watching primetime wrestling on the network, and from like late '85, '86, early '87, Sheik is actually like a really good tag wrestler. And I don't think he gets the credit he deserves for that because he's having really good matches with like the Bulldogs, Killer Bees, Dan Spivey, and Mike Rotundo. Even Mike Rotunda and Barry Windham before he replaced Barry Windham. So like it was just an interesting run for him, and I thought that like it was kind of humbling for him as well because he went from like he took the title from Backlund, has a 1 month run at the top, loses it to Hogan, gets the main events out of it, but then kind of transitioned to this tag role. But in between there is this feud with Slaughter that kind of people forget because 84 is not really known as like the big boom year for WWF. It's 85 because of WrestleMania. But people forget that like Slaughter was like what #2 babyface when he made the turn, and he's like a
And the
huge
thing is
reaction.
that 1984 was literally most of the chess pieces were put on the board, so to speak, to really set up for 85. I mean, 84 in terms of news making is a huge year because you get Piper, you get Heenan, you get Ventura, you get Mean Gene. Hogan basically comes in at the end of 1983. You get Black Saturday. So really, 1984 is about getting the pieces on the board. They're definitely starting to get the train going, but the engine isn't fully loaded yet.
For sure. And you can kind of tell because Gene Okerlund is on color. And whenever Gene Okerlund's on color, it's really early, like, of that run, like either late 84, early 85. And then he finally transitioned out of that role. But Gene really doesn't give himself credit because I watched some of those title match YouTube channel shoot interviews that they've been releasing, those bits and pieces. And he really doesn't give himself the credit that I think he deserves as a color guy. Not just being an interviewer, but he's really good on color, and he really like elevates the match with like a Don West kind of way, and he really elevates this match. Like I think Ventura and like McMahon would call it differently, but because it's Monsoon and Okerlund has that like AWA kind of vibe going, mixed with like Monsoon's old school late 70s, early 80s MSG kind of vibe. It kind of meshed really well, those two together on commentary, and man, I just really enjoyed the rapport together, and it just really elevates the match like a lot. Like I think Mean Gene really takes this match to another level. Not even just the crowd, but like he's feeding off the crowd energy as well. The commentary, and Monsoon I think is of course one of the most underrated, not color guys, but actual like commentators, lead commentator of all time. And this match like kind of just shows like his strengths, Okerlund's strengths on color, and of course Sergeant Slaughter. I mean, my God. I mean, he's known for this corner bump, but man, when he hits it, the crowd is like so sympathetic towards him. It's great because for Sergeant Slaughter's size, he should not be bumping in the corner like he did for so many years. But because he needs that one bump like Bret Hart in the corner, and you can kind of tell that it affected his career because he's not nearly as movable and mobile by 91. So it's unfortunate that he had to kind of throw his body out there for these crazy bumps that he was taking in the early 80s. But man, Sergeant Slaughter really like doesn't get the credit he deserves either, I think, because I think coming back the second time around really, I don't know, in the fans' eyes is like, who's this old guy? Like, I've never seen him before because it was like a new audience by the time he got there. So around 84, it's like the dying days of the old Vince McMahon senior audience, if that makes sense, leaning into this new generation. And of course, like,
this is literally the first show that has ever been run with Vince McMahon Sr. not alive.
Yeah, and it's crazy to look at because, I mean, there's so much blood in this match, and of course that's like anti-Vince McMahon down the line. Like he's totally against that because it's not TV friendly. And this was on the MSG network.
I mean, that's the main reason. And the blood thing has been weird. It's been very up and down, and it feels like we're getting into a period where WWE may be using more blood. I feel like with them moving to Netflix and off of Fox, I feel like, especially because, I mean, they're going to have advertisers for next Netflix, no doubt, but I feel like you might start to see more blood.
Yeah, because this match was gruesome. Like, I think this is the most I've ever seen Iron Sheik bleed, I mean, like, the most. It's rare that he bleeds anyway. So
I'm on the Muda scale, right?
Yeah. But yeah, this match is just crazy, and it's also a false count anywhere match, and WWF never did false count anywhere matches back in the day. And I think what happens though is like they kind of changed the rules a little bit. I don't know how you feel about this, but the pinfall only aspect kind of ruins some of the drama at the end because that means Iron Sheik can't really tease the finish with the Cobra Clutch, not the Cobra Clutch, the Camel Clutch, right? And Sarge can't do the Cobra Clutch either, so that kind of takes away some of it. But it's you're kind of focusing on the brawl.
The type of match, it feels like they built this as a grudge match, and that's how they frame it. That's how they execute it, and I think it works out pretty well. Nonetheless, even without these submissions, I just love the idea of a match where you can't even put somebody in a submission to win. That's pretty gnarly. That you're really setting yourself up for something pretty bloody and vicious when you do that. And I think this is one of the better matches that's ever happened in the history of the company. You mentioned the announcing. What's fascinating to me is that I think when you look at modern announcing, especially, it's bad across the board. I think in WWE, there are people that do like Michael Cole. I have never ever been a huge fan of his. I think AEW commentary is kind of a disaster when you have 3 and 4 people sitting at the table, and when you have Taz and Nigel putting themselves over instead of the match. To me, it's just about find 2 guys who can do the match and just commentate the fucking match. That is all it takes. That's the glory days of Ring of Honor, with Dave Prazak and Lenny Leonard when they were doing the announcing. That's when it was at its best, is find 2 people to call the match, and that's all you need. And if you're going to have a heel commentator, it needs to be somebody who is at the level of a Jesse Ventura or a Bobby Heenan, who can call the show and put the heels over and not put themselves over. And
go ahead.
Go ahead.
See, my theory about this is I think Monday Night Football changed everything when they added the third guy. Was that always a thing? Did Monday Night Football add the third guy to the booth, or was there the third guy before that?
It was definitely a situation where that was perhaps the most famous, because it's the biggest game of the week, because it's so high profile. The fact that they did have 3 announcers was definitely a big deal. I can't say definitively that this is the first time that anybody ever had 3 announcers, but it would not surprise me. But the 3 commentator thing is kind of a huge problem now, just because it feels like these shows are so long. It feels like they feel obligated to have 3 announcers instead of having 2 announcers in a lot of cases, and I just don't think it works out for the most part. Especially in wrestling, I just don't think 3-person announce teams have ever really worked. I think that's true for WCW. I think that's been true for WWE for the most part. And yeah, I think that finding 2 people to just call the show, like you have with Mean Gene and Gorilla Monsoon, they were fine. I don't know that Mean Gene was great, but he certainly did not detract from the match. And look, Gorilla Monsoon is the equivalent of your local baseball announcer who, I don't know if they're a good announcer, but you appreciate just the familiarity and you appreciate the verbal tics at a certain point. When Gorilla Monsoon says that something's happening or the crowds are going bananas or they're hanging from the rafters, that's comfort food for a lot of fans. And I think that's perfectly reasonable and understandable. In terms of the match itself, so what happens is the Iron Sheik wins the WWF title at the end of 83, the day after Christmas 1983. He literally only wins the title so that he can lose the title the next month to Hulk Hogan, who is coming in from the AWA. One of the most interesting things to me that listening to The Last Fan and what they had to say about Hogan's run is that Hogan was known as a choker in AWA because he could never win the big one. Isn't that wild to think about a Hulk Hogan who is basically treated as the Lex Luger of his time?
Well, to be honest, it's only in AWA because they didn't want to put the belt on him because they knew he was going to go to Japan all the time. But in New Japan, he's treated like the fucking top guy that he is at the time. So when I watch those AWA matches with Bockwinkel and I can see the crowd, I just can't help but think why not just give it to him? What's the harm? He's going to go away if you don't.
It's an enormous blunder. You can see how the crowd is reacting to him. And again, we are talking about the heart of the Midwest. We're talking about Minnesota. We're talking about Chicago. We are talking about the heart of the middle of this country, just being in love with this guy. And of course, he's going to go to New York and become an even bigger star just because that's where the business is heading. So Hogan wins the title in January, does the program with Sheik, does programs with David Schultz. He is actually in Japan, and that is why you're getting this as the main event of this special Madison Square Garden show. And this is just a brawl, just straight up a brawl from the moment the bell rings. I do want to point out the entrance. I love the idea that Sergeant Slaughter, before he comes out, this military person comes out and is waving the flag, and then
Private Jerry Daniels of Mid-South Lower Card Hall of Fame, I want to say. I don't want to call him a jobber, but he was definitely on the Mid-South TV a lot, losing like Ted DiBiase.
yes, and this goes about 16 minutes, and I mean there are a lot of not a lot of moves in this match, but it's bloody. Sergeant Slaughter is the one that gets opened up first, but then Cheeky Baby takes just a boot to the head, and he is completely lacerated. He is just bleeding all over the place. I mean, you're in a situation where that mat is so red, and it's pretty wild. Like you just don't see. I mean, honestly, until Mick Foley came in the late 1990s, you flat out did not see this kind of blood and guts in a WWF ring. You just did not really see that. I mean, I know that some of the Bruno Cage matches did have blood, so I want to acknowledge those, but I don't know that they were as bloody as this, and if they were as visceral as this match. I mean, they really built up the idea of the loaded boot and using that at their disposal quite frequently. Also want to point out the heat for this match is just tremendous. This MSG crowd, a well-earned reputation as one of the better crowds, and this match is proof positive as to why, because they are really into Slaughter the whole way through. This is not a smart crowd. This is a crowd that they want to see Slaughter beat Iron Sheik's ass, and that is exactly what they got. I just love the idea of this grudge match, and you just have the babyface beat the holy hell out of the heel for like 5 minutes. I think that's kind of a lost art in another lost art these days, because we are kind of in an era of unclear heels and baby faces. But in this case specifically, this was fantastic. Just the way the crowd responds to Slaughter beating up Iron Sheik. And I mean, that front bump that Slaughter takes, I mean, again, I've only seen two people do it. I see Bret Hart do it. I mean, Bret Hart, it's so much more, it sounds more violent just because he hits it so hard and then he bounces back. But with Slaughter, he hits it and then he goes over the top rope in this match. And he does a version of it in the Hogan match at WrestleMania 7. And it's not as good, but I think it still works. I mean, I still think it's a great bump. And I mean, look, the WrestleMania 7 match has a well-deserved reputation because of the storyline and the fact that, again, Slaughter wasn't a Rocky sympathizer, and that is just very cynical and very callous on the WWF's part. But the match itself, I think, is actually pretty underrated. If you just kind of remove the storyline context, I think as a match, I still think it's very good. But this is just on another level. I mean, this is probably the best match of each of these guys' career. I mean, Sheik is moving pretty well. And yeah, I mean, no Freddie Blassie out there either. This is just a straight up one-on-one match. I mean, the referee kind of looks scared at certain points, which is pretty amusing. And I love the idea that the referee is just not going to interact with this match and is literally just there to count the pinfall.
That's how it should be. Like in every Falls Count Anywhere match, it should be like that. And I'm glad WCW took a note of that when they did like those Cactus Jack ones in the early 90s, those early Falls Count Anywhere matches. Very similar in tone in terms of like the ref just standing back and let the wrestlers do their thing. But man, I think Slaughter, whenever he does that corner bump, is gnarly because if the steps are there, he's going to hit the steps. And I think he hit the steps on this one. And it's so brutal every time. And the guy his size doing that night in and night out, I can't imagine how his knees felt by 91 and how much of a difference that made it. Like it changed his career, man. I feel so bad when I watched that bump. Compared to the Bret Hart bump, it's not nearly as bad on the knees for sure. But yeah, this match, I mean, Slaughter's clothesline that leads to the boot. I mean, that crowd knew like it was coming, and they were electric by the 1, 2, 3. So that was awesome. I would say Slaughter's best match. I would say his second best match might be the Hogan match, but I do remember like when I went to the house show as a kid at the LA Sports Arena in June of '91, it was a boot camp match between Hogan and Slaughter, and I remember that being like really entertaining as a kid because Hogan was doing like the Jason mask thing and the camouflage gimmick. I think they did one of these matches on MSG, and I think it's on the network, but the one I saw obviously was in LA. But man, I remember watching Slaughter do these kind of matches in '91. And then looking back now, it's like, damn, imagine like if he was younger and they allowed more blood, how crazier the match at Mania 7 would have been and how more memorable it would have been. But, you know, c'est la vie, I guess. But, yeah, this match is just crazy, bloody classic. It's kind of like the equivalent to like Magnum and Tully, I Quit. Like it's the WWF version of that. Which they had still like a year before, but still like this is the closest you'll get to a Crockett bloodbath, so to speak, in a WWF ring. And it's just classic. And I want to shout out too, like Slaughter does have another good bloody match, and that's the tag match with him and Don Cornoodle against Jay Youngblood and Ricky Steamboat. You know, that was the one where in Crockett, where if Steamboat and Youngblood lose the cage match, they're gonna never tag again, and it drew a huge house to the point where it inspired Starrcade. So credit again to Sergeant Slaughter for drawing a huge house when you don't expect a guy like Sergeant Slaughter to draw a huge house, even as a heel. But in this case, this babyface run was tremendous. But unfortunately, he stood up to Vince. And what happens when you stood up to Vince? You either lose out on your contract or you end up working for Vince later on. And it's a little bit of both, right?
So essentially what happens is Sergeant Slaughter has the opportunity to get his own action figure that is not associated with the World Wrestling Federation, and Hasbro is making a Sergeant Slaughter figure in relation to the G.I. Joe animated TV show. So Sergeant Slaughter is like, you know what? I'm going to go where the money is right now. And for the most part, he really isn't a part of the WWF until he makes his return in 1990. I mean, he definitely does some shots for AWA over the course of the next few years, to the point where they were going to make him their champion in the late 80s and into 1990. But really, you don't see a lot of Sergeant Slaughter during the big boom period. But he's experiencing kind of a boom of his own by getting a chance to be a part of the G.I. Joe franchise, which was a really big deal in the 1980s. To the point where they were able to release an animated movie that came out in 1987 that was theatrically released. This was coming off
straight to video. Straight to video.
Oh, straight to video. Never mind. Not theatrically released. So this is coming off of the Transformers movie that came out a year earlier. The big deal with the Transformers movie, of course, 40-year-old spoiler alert, but the big deal is Optimus Prime dies, creates a lot of controversy. So what is going to happen with this movie? Part of the reason it may have been moved to straight to video is because of what happened with the Transformers. But with this movie, I feel like what's the adage again, Brian? What's the adage that they say in the show?
Knowing is half the battle, but they didn't even bother using the phrase because it wouldn't have even fit the tone of this movie.
It would not have fit it fits our tone for the podcast because I feel like we needed to watch some of the TV show to more fully appreciate this movie because, I mean, it really feels like it's funny because everybody, they talk about how, it's all connected now, but really feels like this movie, it's hard to really appreciate it without having seen the show.
See, I started thinking that too because I grew up watching the Star Trek movies before I saw the show. Right? And I mentioned that before. So when you grow older and start watching parts of the show, and especially you watch those episodes with Khan, it makes Star Trek 2 even that much better. So I get what you're saying, and I know we're not.
I feel like you can watch the first Star Trek movie, have no idea who the characters are, and you get an idea who the characters are.
I kind of get a sense of that with this one, kind of. And I know there's just so many characters they throw at you, but at least
there's too many characters.
There's too many characters, but at least the story has a flow to it where you can understand what's going on. Because I've seen that Transformers animated movie like 3 or 4 times, and I swear I get lost in that shuffle of the movie the whole every time. I forget which character's who. I forget which planet they're on half the time. I forget they're on different planets half the time. In this case, it's just like we're gonna follow the storyline with Cobra all the way through, and we're gonna even give you some body horror, which I wasn't even expecting, to be honest. But in this case, I never knew G.I. Joe was so sci-fi heavy, in terms of what Cobra is and their origins. Because it turns out Cobra, their origins is like this humanoid lizard society that's been there before humans, and they're trying to take the planet back. I never knew that about Cobra Kai, or not Cobra Kai, Cobra Commander and all that stuff. Yeah, I just thought it was a terrorist organization. I didn't know it had anything to do with bringing lizard people back to the planet and taking over. And of course, that's where Burgess Meredith comes in. He's like the leader. of the Cobra La, or whatever they called the land.
The Cobra La, which is a fantastic name, by the way, and Burgess Meredith is also really good. I was like, Burgess Meredith is listed as one of the people in the movie, and I was like, okay, he's going to be in this for like 5 minutes, and he's got a couple really good speeches in this movie. He is definitely a highlight.
Yeah, it's definitely that unhinged kind of villain that's kind of wanting to end humanity, obviously, and he's not
This is
human
not
himself.
Mickey. This is not Mickey.
No, not at all. He doesn't even give you any sense of hope. He's all about dread and death and taking over the planet and killing all the humans, which is crazy because, again, I never thought that this was like sci-fi stuff. I thought this was like USA, take out the terrorists. We got to take out the Cobra Commander, and the Cobra Commander turns into a snake. Like, whoa, holy shit. You talk about weird shit, man. Like, this movie is all over the place in terms of that kind of thing.
This is how it comes across to me. And I think this is part of what the movie is missing. This to me is what the movie is fundamentally missing. The thing about G.I. Joe is it is both a patriotic, rah-rah America, and I think you see that at the beginning with the battle at the Statue of Liberty, like, very American, but it's also this weird sci-fi, like, terrorist element, and it is really hard to blend those two styles. That is why the live-action movies have never been successful, because they do not have the temerity to really underline either element. Like, to me, the G.I. Joe live-action movies just become these generic military action movies. That's not what that's not what they're supposed to be. And again, I don't think this movie is perfect, but you get the idea of, okay, they are going all in on the idea of this is a military organization, and they are very strict about it, and they have rules, and these are emphasized to one of the new recruits, Captain Falcon, played by Don Johnson. And to me, I think that's one of the things the movie does really well. It's just getting the idea of this military organization that is very pro-America. And again, I'm not saying that I'm necessarily a jingoistic person, but to me, if you're going to go in on it, you have to play this totally straight. And that's one of the things that I think the movie does well, is it plays the patriotic elements straight, and it also plays the sci-fi elements straight.
Yeah, and I think that Falcon character, he's actually really good, because at first he's like, who's this character? Is Don Johnson just doing a voiceover for a random character? Because what happens is they're introducing new recruits, right? And the reason they're doing that is so kids can buy the new recruits as toys, obviously. That's what they did in the Transformers movie as well, introduce new characters, kind of transition to that, to kids buying into those characters. But in this case, they did the reveal that he's actually Duke's younger half-brother, I guess, or something. Which I think is a good twist, because it shows you, like, okay, this is not just a random character. Something big is going to happen here. And then when Duke sacrifices himself in the original cut, in the original cut he dies, folks. Okay, so because he gets a serpent through the heart, and somehow they said, oh no, he's in a coma. He's fine. He's in a coma, and he wakes up at the end. But in the original cut, obviously he dies, and it becomes this thing about getting revenge for the brother. But I think Don Johnson actually did a good job in the voice acting. Like, in that moment when he goes down, he's like, just give me a gun. I want one shot at the serpent guy or whatever. And he really wanted to kill him, man, and he gets his chance to. So that was a really cool, like, setup for a payoff later on in the movie, which I wasn't expecting, like, a payoff like that. I was like, okay, are we going to get a payoff to this? And we did. We got it 20 minutes later, and it was really good. So, at least the script is, like, straightforward. Like I said, too many characters, but it's just, at least we're getting to the point. We're not wasting time on some characters. Like, so at first I was thinking, oh man, this thing about training the new guys, this is going to be a waste of time. They're just trying to fill time. But in actuality, it sets it up for them actually sneaking in and being a big part of the mission with Sergeant Slaughter. So I was like, okay, this is actually, like, everything's coming full circle, even with Sergeant Slaughter, because I thought Slaughter's just going to have a cameo, say hello, do his thing, and get out. But he actually, like, nearly dies. That dude got a face hugger on him, dude, and he's nearly choked to death. And I was just like, oh my God, did they just nearly kill Sergeant Slaughter? And then he shakes it off, puts his sunglasses back on, puts his hat back on, and he's ready to kick ass again. So that was really cool how they booked him, so to speak, as this badass, gets the job done, training the new recruits. And it's just crazy to look at, because if you look at the Wikipedia, the starring roles are Don Johnson, Burgess Meredith, Sergeant Slaughter. It's like, what? But, in this case, in the G.I. Joe world, it just makes sense. So, and they do get the top billing, obviously, even though, Duke is probably like the main character, obviously, in Cobra Commander. But obviously, what they were trying to do is close out the show and give you this finale. Because after this, there was no like follow-up show. They did like a new generation show that's loosely connected to it. That it was like, I don't know. That's the one I remember watching as a kid on like USA Network. But I never watched the original 80s run because of the quality difference. I could tell, like, oh, I'm watching the newer one. But yeah, this was a good way to wrap up the show, I think. Like, I've never watched the show, but this feels like it was a good way to wrap it up based on what I'm reading. And this actually has like a solid rating on IMDb, like a 7 out of 10. I give it like a 6.5, to be honest, because I just
I
felt
would
like
probably say 5.5 or 6. I mean, again, I don't think the movie is bad. I think it just feels very rushed. I do like the fact that it's 93 minutes. And again, I think if I'd seen the TV show, I might feel like maybe I would be there with you at a 7. But I mean, that's the thing is G.I. Joe and Transformers was just a little bit before my time. Like that Masters of the Universe, like we're talking like 1983 to 87, and I'm not really watching stuff until like 89, really. So for me, it's like it's DuckTales, it's the Gummy Bears, it's the Ninja Turtles, and then we kind of enter kind of a golden age with X-Men and Spider-Man and Batman, the animated series. So it's just, again, this is just a little bit too early, so it's really hard for me to appreciate it. But this is quite the trip down memory lane, and that opening sequence was a definite plus. It definitely got me into the movie very quickly. That's the sequence at.
Yeah, I told you, man. That's what I read. Like that was the coolest part of the movie, and I don't know. I don't know if I read this wrong or just misremember, but it feels like that was a different animation company that came in and did that. Because from what I read, like they already finished the movie and they needed to pad it and they wanted to add more, and they added that sequence because I guess that was originally going to be the sequence at the end of the movie, and they switched the script. So yeah, it just because the animation looks different. Like it seems like a different style altogether.
I mean, I definitely missed you. This movie definitely made me want to bring back 2D animation. That's for sure.
Yeah, because I was just blown away at how they were able to do that with 2D. And I know it's a lot going on in those 2-minute action sequence, but man, it just looks great because they're on the Statue of Liberty, and there's all these different characters in the background and in the foreground. It was great. That's definitely the highlight of the movie, and that's definitely that song is going to be kind of stuck in my head for a while. Cobra, G.I. Joe, Donna. Yeah, they got it down. So.
All right, so that is the right match for this week and for this month. Brian, I want to call a little bit of an audible here because next week we're kind of doing a patriotic theme. We're also keeping track of anniversaries. Brian, there are 2 parodies that I believe are celebrating anniversaries that I think we need to discuss. One of which is very, very timely.
Okay, because I think originally you wanted to do Team America, but Team America's October? But I thought you maybe just wanted to do it early.
Team America is the one parody. The other is Dick. Dick from 1999.
See, I've never seen that at all, but I've heard good things. There's been a lot of
Richard Nixon conversation going on recently, Brian. So I think we should look at these 2 parodies. And keeping with the theme of America, Dick celebrating its 25th anniversary. Of course, Team America celebrating its 20th anniversary, also coming off the heels of our discussion of these South Park movies. So it makes a lot of sense that very shortly thereafter, we would cover Team America, World Police. So that's what we are doing next week.
Yes. I know it came out on October 15th, and I saw it opening day, but it just kind of feels right we do it in July. And man, God, I just have so many memories of that movie and just the shock and awe, some of the scenes of the audience in that movie.
It is a movie that has not aged well.
I mean, we say that, but man, I remember that sex scene in the audience.
I want to be clear. There's still some very funny stuff. Like there's still some things that do hold up well, but it's going to be a little rough. It's going to be a little rough. And in 2 weeks, go ahead.
I still laugh at Damon. So there you go.
Oh, absolutely. 2 weeks from now, Ben Phillips and I will be returning to discuss a big time Disney list that we came and put together. We did part 1 earlier this year. We will be doing part 2 It's going to be very interesting. One of us, Brian, has Mulan ranked very high. One of us has Mulan ranked much lower. So going to be an interesting conversation. So that is in 2 weeks. Probably going to be a 3-hour episode forthcoming on the middle portion of our Disney list.
For sure, and I'm looking forward to listening to that as well, because the countdown is coming, and it's coming towards the end of the year where you kind of close it out. But I've been on a little Disney Disney run myself, and also checking out some of the stuff that's out of print. So yeah, I'm up to date on my Disney stuff.
All right, so for Brian, again, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again next week.